Architectural Builders Supply is pleased to present you with this recording of the technical question that is listed in the title of this video.
This call may be monitored and recorded for quality assurance.
Sure.
Would you happen to have that SP-7079 Revision A in front of you, or can you get your hands on it?
Yeah, I can get it. Yeah. It was an ST7079.
Well, that's what it says on the top of it. It says a custom 1027 center pivot, and on the bottom it says SP-7079 Revision A.
Yeah, SP, special. We'll find it. Stand by.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you've got a that custom pivot, SPLO. Template. Okay, doke. I am looking at that template.
Okay, so at the door elevation, it's showing a 5/8 radius. And I was curious if they could tell me, obviously it's 2 3/4 back.
You said 5/8 radius, but it's actually a 2 5/8 radius.
Okay, I guess I'm misreading it then. It says, okay, there's a 2 after the R. Okay.
Yeah, it's goofy. It should.
Okay.
There should be. It's not. Yeah, R2. I'm not sure what R2 means.
Oh.
Yeah, that's 2 5/8.
Okay, so here's that door is gonna, if you're looking at it the way it is, that's from the top down, the view, that photo there. So that's gonna swing out to it's gonna be a right hand outswing essentially, all the,
Sure.
100% of the time.
Sure.
Okay. So I don't see the reason for putting the radius on the backhand side of that slab. It's never gonna radius 180 degrees into the room. It's only gonna go 90 up against the wall.
Yes, sir.
You with me?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So with that in mind, I don't have to radius both sides then, correct?
You would not put so the answer is correct. You're only going to bullnose the pole side, like the top row of tile in a bathroom.
Okay, so then 2 5/8 radius, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to replicate that on the slab. Do you know how far back from the edge of the door the edge of that radius stops?
Well, it'd be right in the center of the thickness.
I understand that portion, but I'm saying, I'm just trying to think. I was trying to think how I'm going to produce that on the door, buying a router bit, or, you know what I'm saying, or freehand sanding it. I mean, that's a hell of a job to do on a 7-foot high door.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. You might look for the larger. Well, I don't know. Well, first of all, there are people that make that tooling. You might also look for someone who has a standard size that's awfully close, and then adjust the gap between the edge of the door and the jamb accordingly, because the way it's drawn, it would be 1/8 of an inch.
Right. Well, the door, I've custom made up the slabs in my shop. And now I'm going to have to put the radius on it. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, you are. Yep. Or, of course, you could modify is the jamb already in?
Yeah, the jam's already in. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, you're either going to need to get a radius on there or make that 1/8 of an inch margin, or change that 1/8 of an inch margin.
Right. Well, I mean, this is governed on the width of the door, so I really can't change that 1/8 inch margin. I got to put the radius.
It's governed on the thickness. Yeah, that's right.
Right. Well, the width of the door, that was basically based on the thickness of the slab in relation to the opening. Yes. So it's a 2 5/8 radius then. but only on one side of the door. So you don't know how far back that comes then, do you?
To where?
From that 1/8 inch gap on the slab.
I'm not following the question.
I guess from the edge of the door back, how far? 2 5/8. The center of the slab is 2 5/8. So just get the center and strike that a half, and then bring it accordingly.
Yes. Yeah, of course. You've got a 5 1/8 inch door. You've got half of that's obviously going to be, it's going to be less than that. It's going to be 2 9/16. So
right.
That as the arc leaves the center of the thickness of the door and comes towards the face of the door in elevation on the pull side, it's going to stop, short of the center line, and it's going to be 2 9/16 over from the center of the thickness over. If the horizontal line there that is striking or showing the center of the thickness, if you went back 2 9/16 and then come straight down, that's how far back on the face of the door you would start. Yeah. Starting there would be less important, really, in my opinion, than in the center of the thickness of the door. Depending on the degree of opening and where the door sits, it's possible your door is going to need to look like that drawing.
Mm-hmm. Which, when I'm all said and done, then that radius is going to be basically off of the jamb, like the 2 5/8 then, on one side, or 2 3/4. Excuse me, the 1/8 inch plus the 2 5/8, which is actually a little more than I was hoping for. But I guess you got to do what you got to do with this situation.
So I don't know the largest roundover bit that's commercially available. I think the one I own is greater than a 2 inch radius, maybe 2 1/4. I forget. So if you were to get the largest one available, and then just simply increase that 1/8 of an inch, if you can, to something larger, I would probably start with a 1/4 inch, depending on the radius. You would then be able to not have to get into custom tooling to make this happen.
Yeah. I've never seen anything that large for a router. Wow. I guess I'll have to look.
What about the idea of just, running that end of the door on a table saw a number of times to where you change the degree of the blade, and then you
these thoughts are going through my head. I'm just thinking, the thing is, it's basically a 2-man operation. The door's so heavy.
For sure.
That's the thing. But I guess I'll research your bid. Is it for a shaper or is it for a router?
Well, if it's going to be a shaper, then I would imagine you're going to run something like this through a shaper. Every time I've radius for bullnose doors, I've modified a large hand router and have done it by hand. And I've done radiuses greater than 2 inch by hand. Although, you've got to be mindful of the massive amount of tooling that you're spinning.
Right.
A shaper, a shaper is going to be the way that you would probably want to, push that door down against.
Right. Yeah, because I was going to do a mock-up before I even did the slab. I was thinking of building a frame, excuse me, a 5 1/4 inch frame and putting a radius on it. The question is, obviously, that's going to be thick enough so you don't cut through the frame for the radius. But yeah, I guess I'll search some more for 2 5/8 radius, essentially.
And the jam is already installed.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the
sometimes
jam
you'll
is
see.
the jam is split cedar in the middle, and then it's painted one side to the side that's going to be painted. The other side cedar for the sauna area. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's permanent. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll play around with trying to find something to make this a little bit easier.
Yeah. I don't know what tooling would cost.
I mean, I have a shaper. I just pushing something. I'd rather drag a router, I think, over this versus pushing something this big through a shaper. It's just awkward as hell. That's the thing.
You might want to do just the style of the door before assembly.
Well, I've got the slabs glued together. I'm basically there. I've got two slabs of the OSB glued epoxied together. I'm going to epoxy a 1/2 inch over the outside of the slabs to cover the particle board of the slabs, and then I'll be there. So then it's a question of putting the radius on, and then obviously doing a dry run of the hardware in another mock-up to see how it all works.
Yeah, I don't think a shaper is the idea, because that, the door is not going to be perfectly flat,
right,
at all. I just searching online, I can immediately find a 2-inch round over. Actually, no, that's only 1.25" radius. That's way too small. Yeah, no, I know mine is a Mana round over. Yeah, I'd have to research how large mine is. I don't have it available. At the end of the day, you might want to research what proper tooling would cost for it. You take your router base and you drill, you cut the router base out to fit that massive bit in there, and you're not left with very much remaining of it.
Right.
Round over. Yeah, I'd have to look. I don't recall if mine's a Mana or someone else. If you want, I know where my bit is. I can go grab it and tell you the name of the manufacturer.
Yeah, if you want, sure. I mean, I've dealt with a Mana before, Whiteside, Freud. I mean, yeah.
It might be Freud, actually. Let me look. Without having to get up. Freud. Round over. Yeah, I think this is it. It's the kind of thing you buy and then you have it forever and you forget
right
whose it is. Round over. Yeah, because it is. Shaper cutters. Yeah, bear with me. I've got to walk over there. Stand by.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Mana, but I don't see in their current catalog that they have one of that size.
Yeah.
That bit is quite old.
Okay. I'll try Whiteside then. See.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Whiteside router bits. Round over. Round over. R. What's the largest R? They got an inch and a half. Ah, shit. It's way off. They've got an inch and a half radius from what I
That's
can
their
see.
largest. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gets me close.
If that gap from eighth of, it shouldn't be an eighth of an inch realistically based on your construction of what you're doing. You're probably going to need more gap between there anyway. It's, I probably would get a quote for a router bit and then alter the gap between the door and the jamb based on the largest round over that you can get.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was fixed to this radius, but all right, that's based on the 1/8 inch then.
Exactly. The relationship between that radius and the 1/8 of an inch is direct.
Uh-huh. So if I get an inch and a half, I wonder how much that would increase it.
If I was going to guess, I would say likely 1/4 to 5/16 would be my guess. I'd have to put it in AutoCAD to know for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me do some more investigating then.
Yeah. You could, yeah. A compass, some pieces of paper, and a nail, if you follow me.
Right.
Yeah. So that would be a way to do it without taking an hour to draw something in AutoCAD.
All right.
Why don't you, if you like, let me know what radius roundover bit you can come up with. Email that to me if you like, or call me, and I will toss it all into AutoCAD as quickly as I can to be able to verify perhaps your conclusions, or at least tell you what it would absolutely have to be.
Okay. Well, let me dig around then at router bits. Whiteside 1.5 inches is what you found then, huh? Okay.
Yeah, it's there. I'm not familiar with Whiteside, but
yeah.
They have their model 2016. That appears to be their largest roundover bit, 1.5 inch radius.
All right. Yeah, I spoke to them earlier, but I was looking at something else. All right. Let me look further.
I would think they could. Yeah, call them and tell them what you're looking at and see how, maybe they've got something not in their book.
Right. All right. Thank you. Bye.
All right, sir. Bye-bye.
If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Okay, so what we have in this part of the video is we're going to demonstrate, we're going to hopefully quickly draw the door in AutoCAD to determine how much room there needs to be between the jamb and the edge of the door when the radius is going to deviate from what the template calls out. Let's take a look at that. And what the template calls out, as you can see, well, this is the door. It's a 5 1/8 inch thick door. While this is worded a bit oddly, it is radius 2 5/8. So the radius here needs to actually be 2 5/8 of an inch, shown right here. And the client, as you heard earlier, called today, and we were trying to figure out how to go about getting that 2 5/8 radius. Yeah, I mean, it's custom tooling is part of the answer, but realistically, as you may recall, he's able to come up with an R1.5, an 1.5" radius, which is an extremely large roundover bit. Turns out my roundover bit is 1.25" radius, so it's less than half this size. And I would have indeed considered the ramifications of what the template required prior to ordering the hardware. The client had all of this and has seen all of this before the order was placed. And I do feel it's a bit awkward where the client now says, wait a minute, what do I have to do? Well, yeah, I mean, that's what the template calls out. But the bottom line is 1/8 of an inch. You change this radius to something else, and all we got to do is increase this. And the purpose of this video is to show what we absolutely have to increase this to. Boy, I wish I would have thought about asking them for the DWG file of this. That would have been awesome, because I could have just quickly modified that. Okay, anyway, as you also know, the client's going to do a bull nose. The door over here is just going to be square edge. This will be bull nose. So our task now is to figure out what this needs to change to based on R1.5. So let's do that. Okay, let's muddle through this. Admittedly, I do not draw in AutoCAD as nearly as much as I would like to. So this may be a series of starts and stops. So let's see what we have going here. Okay, so what I've been able to accomplish is these grids. This is a 1/16 of an inch. This is a 1/4 inch. So just the major and minor snap lines or grid lines are colored. I've got this weird green color for the majors, and these are 1/16 of an inch. So that will just help us identify that a little bit better. Okay. So what we want to do is draw a couple of polylines. Okay. Draw polyline. Okay. So down here in the bottom, right here, you can see where I'm moving. So I don't recall the width of the door nor the height, but I'm not really concerned about it. So our polyline, we're going to draw our jamb first. So our jamb will be 1/4 inch over on the x-axis. So we'll specify here, and then we'll go, I don't know. I don't know how large the frame is. Yeah, I'm going to guess 7 inch, and that's what I've got drawn here, 7 inch. And then I'm going to say that it is 3/4 inch thick, and obviously back down to 7 inch. Oh, okay. Okay, so 0.75, then 7, then 0.75. All right, so here's our jamb. This is our origin, so just ignore the fact that that line bleeds over. So that's our 7 inch jamb. Okay. So you can see our jamb is 7 by 3/4. Easy peasy. Okay, so let's now draw our door. And we're going to call this a left-hand reverse door. And we're going to start our polyline. Let's turn our grid back on, our dizzying grid. I'm going to assume we're going to start with a 1/4 inch margin. So from here, we're at 1 inch from the origin. This is a 1/4 inch. This is 3/4. So right here is 1 inch from the origin. I'm going to start a 1/4 inch away. So if you recall, our template wants 1/8 of an inch. Actually, I'm going to make it 5/16. It's just my educated guess as to what we'll need with an 1.5 inch radius. It's just an educated guess. But we will for sure know what that's going to be. So let's draw a polyline. And again, I'm sorry for how awful I am at AutoCAD, but I don't have enough opportunity to practice. So now I know I'm at 1 5/16 from the origin, because just watch down here. I'm at 1 5/16 from the origin, 1.3125. I'm going to start my polyline. It's going to be 5 1/8, because that is our door thickness. I'm going to turn off our grid, a little bit easier to see. Then I'm going to assume our door, I think the door is 42. So we're just going to call it out as 42. And then down here it's going to be, 5 1/8. And then we're going to make that 42. Escape. Now, we have a 7 inch jamb, that's 3/4. We have a 5 1/8 inch thick by 42 inch door. All right. Now, measure, quick. Okay, we're good. 5 1/8 and 42. So we know that that works. Okay. Now what we have to do is give ourselves an 1.5 inch radius. So, and I'm fully aware of the fact that there are far faster ways to do this, but I am just not that guy with my AutoCAD skills. So 1.5 inch radius. So I'm going to want to go an 1.5 inch in. So an 1.5 inch will put us, so this point is, draw, circle. All right, so we're going to be, this point is 1 5/16. 2 and let's take a look. 1 5/16 plus 1.5. So 2 13/16. So we need to be at 2 13/16 from the origin. So 2 13/16. Right there. Then an 1.5 inch up from our x-axis. We're 1.5 inch up, and now we are 2 13/16 from our origin. Now we draw our circle, our radius, and there you go. Yeah, I don't think this is going to be that big of a deal. So now what we're going to do, let's turn those snap features off. Now what we're going to do is trim. Trim that, trim this, trim this. Here we go. Let's turn off the trim. There you go. Now, actually, what would do the client a lot better, I'll tell you this, what would really solve this client's problem, it's pretty obvious. Now when you draw it, it's obvious. The client said he had a really heavy bevel over here. I actually don't recall what he said, but he has a heavy bevel over here. He may have said a 45 for all I know. I don't know. Because when you have something so thick, you know what? We'll draw that as well if we can. It's not our mandate, but we can. What would solve the client's problem would be, rather than to put the vertical axis of pivoting per the template in here, if he moved it out over here, it would solve the problem. So first, according to the template, but first, utilities measure distance. Utilities measure quick. 5/16 is the gap that I'm running with here, just educated guess. So the vertical axis of pivoting is 2 5/8 from the edge of the door, and it's centered in the door, even though that's not called out. It should be called out, frankly, but it's not. So the bottom line is, if we were to shift that center of vertical axis of pivoting over here, I don't think he needs to change his margin that heavily, if at all. I mean, he shouldn't have to. Because really, because it's single acting, because it's single acting, you can think of it as a thin door at that point. You can think of this as a 6-inch door. Okay, 1.5 inch. Pardon me. You can think of it as a 3-inch door, because we're only swinging in one direction. So if we move the vertical axis of pivoting over here, his problem is going to be solved perfectly. But let's draw out the way that it's on the template, and then we'll explore the other way. Now, what I need to do is I need to join all of these items. Combine and make them into a yeah, okay. I think I know what we have to do. What I want to do is join all this as a single item, but I think when we go to rotate it, we'll automatically get that. So now what we want to do is rotate the object. So modify rotate. There is a function called rotate. Specify the base point. So I've joined these items. Now the base point is going to be it's actually going to be 2 3/4 from the jam. So we know that we're at 0 on the x-axis and that the door is flush with the face of the frame. There is no inset. So what we need to do is to go 5 1/8 divided by 2 is 2 9/16. So we know we need to go 2 9/16 off of our x-axis. Two 9/16 up. And then from here we need to go to 3 3/4. 3 3/4 and 2 9/16. That's our rotation point. Okay, so now what we need to do is turn off the ortho mode, and here we go. Okay, okay. Let's turn off our grid. Yeah, we can see really well what we're doing here. 5/16 was way off. Way off. But that issue is because of where our vertical axis of pivoting where our vertical axis of pivoting is. Let's measure how much that is encroaching into the space. Measure. Quick. That's not working for me. So utilities, measure, distance. Let's turn off the snap. Yeah, okay, so it's 8 3/16, 6, so 5, 10, so about 11/64 of an inch is what this is off. It's encroaching into the space 11/64. So we would need to add basically another 3/16 to our 5/16 for this. So the answer is 5/16, 0.3125, and it was plus 0.16875 is kind of where we were. And that's going to put us at almost a ½ inch. And if we're going to add a typical 1/8 of an inch, that dimension is going to need to be 5/8 of an inch is the margin. And when we put that vertical axis of pivoting here, 2 9/16, and then 2 3/4 from the jamb. Now, let's move our vertical axis of pivoting 2 3/4 over, but then only 1.5 inches up rather than 2 3/4. Let's see what happens now. Let's turn our grid back on. We got our snap on. Okay, so let's modify, rotate, select objects. Okay, I've got the object I'm going to rotate. Enter, specify base point. So that base point needs to be 3 inch from the x-axis, pardon me, 1.5 inches from the x-axis, and 3 3/4 from the y-axis, and 1.5 inches from the 3 3/4 from the x, 1.5 inches from the y. There is our point. Let's turn off our grid and our snap. Our ortho, sorry. Yeah, you can see that my 5/16 is way too large. Way too large. Let's take our jamb, which grid, snap, move, specify displacement. I'm going to go with 3/16. That's not what I want. Specify base point displacement. I don't remember the move function very well. Obviously. So let's do this. We know that we had 5/16. Let's make this 1/8 by taking our frame and simply moving it over. All right. Now, basically what I've done is made the jamb 15/16 thick, whatever. We can make it smaller if we need to. Let's verify that we have 1/8 of an inch. Utilities, measure, quick. Quick is no good. Utilities, measure, distance. Yeah, 1/8 of an inch. That's what we've got. Okay, so now let's rotate. Let's modify, rotate, select your objects. Okay, enter. Specify the base point. We want to have from here, it needs to be 2 3/4. So 1 3/16, 3 3/16. So it's going to be 3 15/16 over. 2.75 plus 1.1875. Yeah, 3 15/16. So our base point is going to be 3 15/16 from the y-axis and 1.5 inches from the x-axis. That's our point. Let's turn off snap and grid. Yeah. I mean, it's just absolutely no problem like that. In fact, you can see that you'll get, I won't beleaguer this video by trying to determine what that angle is, but I know that there's an easy way to do it. So we're gonna get a really good amount. In fact, he doesn't need to go with an 1.5 inch radius. If we move the vertical axis of pivoting 1.5 inches from the face of the door, and then per the template at 2 3/4, in fact, the client would be able to get by with less than 1/8. I mean, in fact, you're going to get by with, nominally 0. Now, the issue is two 3/4 and then 2 9/16. The hardware is 2 inch wide. So that means it's 1 inch here. So what that really means is he's going to see some of the hardware here sticking out. And I frankly don't think that that's really going to matter that much. So 1.5 inches. So if we put it at 2.5, let's do this. If we made the hardware such that the jamb came in measure distance. So basically 1 5/16, 2 5/16. Let's say that we went up 2 5/16 from the x-axis, and then 2 3/4 over. 2 5/16, and then 2 3/4. So let's rotate. Modify, rotate. Select objects. Okay. Enter. Specify base point. It's going to be 3 15/16 over from that jamb, and then 2 5/16 from the x-axis. Snap. 2 5/16 from the x, 3 15 from the y. That's our point of rotation. Okay. So now, what we see here is, yeah, we're gonna need more. Utilities, measure distance, just not being super technical. That's 1/8 of an inch. So that would be 1/4 inch 1/4 inch margin would do it if the vertical axis of pivoting was such that the floor plate came right here so that you really didn't see it. So we're biasing it towards 2 5/16 from the x-axis when it would normally be 2 9/16. 3, so it's only 1/4 inch shifted. So it really depends on where they want to put it. So if it was me, I mean, we knew that we were going to need a 1/2 inch gap with 1 1/2 inch radius. We knew that. To have it at 2 3/4 over and then in the center of the door. All the way to 0 if we were to move the vertical axis, well, to 1 1/2 inch. We go to 2 5/16, so we know we're going to need 1/4 inch. So that's the decision the client will have to make. But 1 1/2 inch radius would be no problem. Actually, if the pivot point was brought out here, if he flushed the hardware off here and we went 1 inch in, 1 3/4 inch over, his radius could be very, very small. I mean, well, let's figure it out. If we flushed the floor bracket, and what I mean by that is if we took the 2 inch wide massive bracket at the bottom, which is extremely thick, it's 1/2 inch thick, and we flush that here, then we're going to be at 1 inch and 2 3/4. So let's see what we would need. So now let's just rotate it because we already have it drawn. Modify, rotate, select objects, base point, snap on, grid on. So we're going to be at 3 15/16. And then 1 inch in. I mean, you can see that rotation is that margin is going to be super tiny. Let's take a look. Let's run this. Oops. Now we've got that put back together as a door, so to speak. Let's grab a circle now, just to see what that looks like. Let's grab a circle. Let's turn on our grid again. And let's say that it's a typical 3/4 inch radius. Should be 1 5/16, and then 3/4. Utilities, measure, radius, 3/4 inch radius. Okay, let's modify, let's trim this. Now we've got a 3/4 inch radius. Let's put our pivot point, let's rotate. Let's select our object. enter. Let's specify our base point. Again, 3 15/16, and then 3/4 up. So 3 15/16, 3/4 inch. Okay, so that is going to be our 3/4 and then 3 15/16. Okay, so rotate, select objects. Oops, don't want to rotate all of it. Base point, 3 15, 3/4 inch. Yeah, that works out really well. I mean, you need nothing. In fact, let's rotate the base point where it would normally be, just to see how much it would be. It would, we're at, I think it was 5/16. Let's rotate. Let's select our objects. Base point. So 3 15 and then 2 9/16. Yeah, you're gonna need a ton of room if you only use a 3/4. Now, one thing that you'll see in the old catalogs is where they would actually concave the jamb. That's another way to do this. Let's do this. Let's extend that to 5 1/8. Let's extend that to 42. Great. Let's go with a pivot point that is 1 inch up from the x-axis. Rotate, select objects. Base point, it's going to be 3 15 and then 1 inch. You move that. If you move that vertical axis of pivoting such that the hardware is here, you flush it right here, you're going to need very little additional room. So let's see what a 1/4 inch does. Let's draw a circle, center radius. Sorry. Circle, radius. Two. Let's say a 1/4 inch radius. Let's trim here, here, here. Let's rotate. ROT. Let's select our object. Let's give it our base point, which is going to be 1 in 15, and then 1 inch from the x-axis. Yeah, that would be good. Let's turn off our grid and our snap. Yeah, it's going to be really tight. So that's a 1/4 inch radius. Let's see what that actually becomes. Appears to be pretty close right there. Let's just leave it there. Let's get in here and measure that. Utilities measure quick. Nope. Utilities measure distance. Okay, so that's really small. That is a 90th of an inch. Yeah. So that's going to need to get bigger. Obviously, we're going to need to get that out to 1/8 of an inch. So maybe a 1/2 inch radius. Let's try that. Why wouldn't we? Let's try a 1/2 inch radius. Draw, circle, center radius. We're dealing with 8, 11, so 1 and 1 and 13/16. Half inch radius. So we're dealing with 3 and 15/16, and then a 1/2 inch up. So 1/2 inch radius. Draw, circle, center radius. So from here, half inch radius. Let's turn off that's, well, not just yet. Let's trim. Okay. Let's put our rotate command. Let's select our object. Let's now give it our base point. 3 and 15, and then 1 inch up. 3 and 15, and 1 inch. There it is. Let's turn off our snap and our grid. Oh yeah. 1/2 inch radius, move that vertical axis of pivoting order over. Measure distance. Looks like it's about closest here. So that's a 1/16 of an inch. So 3/8 radius would probably work really well. Oh, pardon me. Maybe a 5/8 radius. If you wanted an 1/8 of an inch margin there. Draw circle, center radius, so 2 1/16. I had that wrong, but that's okay. 5/8 radius. Let's move it over. Okay, let's trim. Trim, modify trim, select objects. Okay, now we're going to put our pivot back to where we've been talking about, 3 15/16, and then 1 inch. Select objects. Okay, 3 15, and then 1 inch. Turn off our snap and our grid. Oh, that looks good. Looks like it's pretty close there. Let's measure that. Utilities measure distance. So almost 3/32 with a 5/8 radius. So 3/4 is probably what we're dealing with. Draw circle, center radius, .75. Let's move it to where we need. Let's trim. Modify trim. Okay, let's rotate. Let's select our objects. Let's, okay. Enter, specify base point. So now we've got a 3/4 inch radius. We're going to go 3 15 and 1 inch. Turn off our snap and our grid. Yeah. 3/4 inch radius. Let's see what that looks like now. Yeah, right about there is where it's going to be closest. Let's utilities measure quick. Utilities measure distance. Yeah, almost 1/8 of an inch. Very, very close to 1/8 of an inch. So that's a 3/4 inch radius. How about a 7/8 radius? Let's do it. Draw circle, center radius, 0.875. Let's place it where we need. Let's modify, trim that, trim that. Modify, trim that. Escape, rotate, select objects, enter, base plate, base point 3 and 15, and then 1 inch. Turn off, turn off. Let's see. Yeah, I have no problem with this at all. You're not. That looks like to be about as close as it gets. Measure, quick, measure distance. Bingo. 1/8 of an inch. Close enough. 0.122. So 7/8 radius. If you flush the hardware here, 7/8 radius. If you flush the hardware here. If you don't, you're going to need a much bigger gap based on 1.5 inches. I don't recall what it was. I think it was about 1/2 of an inch. If you move that pivot point to the center of the thickness of the door. So, depending on how little of the hardware the client wants to see, you know, if you don't mind seeing a little bit of the hardware in this space here, you're going to be fine. I would just use a 7/8 radius, maybe a 1 inch radius, and then you'll have, you know, you'll be in better shape with the gap. But I think that's really all you need on this. So the question becomes is, where is the client willing to put the vertical axis of pivoting in relationship to the pull side of the door? We know that the 2 3/4 is fixed from the jamb. We know that. We're getting that from the fact that the hardware is built only for this. And it's here. This is our bottom bracket. Nothing we can do about the fact from the face of this to the vertical axis of pivoting is 3/4. That's fixed. But what we can do is play with where in the depth we can place it. So I have nothing to add. If additional information comes to light about how the client wants us to tweak that dimension, we will update this. Thank you very much. If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it. 2 and let's take a look. 1 5/16 plus 1.5. So 2 and 13/16. So we need to be at 2 and 13/16 from the origin. So 2 and 13/16. Right there. Then 1.5 inches up from our x-axis. We're 1.5 inches up, and now we are 2 13/16 from our origin. Now we draw our circle, our radius, and there you go. Yeah, I don't think this is going to be that big of a deal. So now what we're going to do, let's turn those snap features off. Now what we're going to do is trim. Trim that, trim this, trim this. Here we go. Let's turn off the trim. There you go. Now, actually, what would do the client a lot better, I'll tell you this, what would really solve this client's problem, it's pretty obvious. Now when you draw it, it's obvious. The client said he had a really heavy bevel over here. I actually don't recall what he said, but he has a heavy bevel over here. He may have said a 45 for all I know. I don't know. Because when you have something so thick, you know what? We'll draw that as well if we can. It's not our mandate, but we can. What would solve the client's problem would be, rather than to put the vertical axis of pivoting per the template in here, if he moved it out over here, it would solve the problem. So first, according to the template, but first, utilities measure distance. Utilities measure quick. 5/16 is the gap that I'm running with here, just educated guess. So the vertical axis of pivoting is 2 5/8 from the edge of the door, and it's centered in the door, even though that's not called out. It should be called out, frankly, but it's not. So the bottom line is, if we were to shift that center of vertical axis of pivoting over here, I don't think he needs to change his margin that heavily, if at all. I mean, he shouldn't have to, because really, because it's single acting, you can think of it as a thin door at that point. You can think of this as a 6-inch door. Okay, 1.5 inches. Pardon me. You can think of it as a 3-inch door, because we're only swinging in one direction. So if we move the vertical axis of pivoting over here, his problem is going to be solved perfectly. But let's draw out the way that it's on the template, and then we'll explore the other way. Now, what I need to do is I need to join all of these items. Combine and make them into a okay. I think I know what we have to do. What I want to do is join all this as a single item, but I think when we go to rotate it, we'll automatically get that. So now what we want to do is rotate the object. So modify rotate. There is a function called rotate. Specify the base point. So I've joined these items. Now the base point is going to be, it's actually going to be 2 3/4 from the jam. So we know that we're at 0 on the x-axis and that the door is flush with the face of the frame. There is no inset. So what we need to do is to go 5 1/8 divided by 2 is 2 9/16. So we know we need to go 2 9/16 off of our x-axis, two 9/16 up, and then from here we need to go to 3 3/4, 3 3/4, and 2 9/16. That's our rotation point. Okay, so now what we need to do is turn off the ortho mode, and here we go. Okay, okay. Let's turn off our grid. Yeah, we can see really well what we're doing here. 5/16 was way off. Way off. But that issue is because of where our vertical axis of pivoting where our vertical axis of pivoting is. Let's measure how much that is encroaching into the space. Measure. Quick. That's not working for me. So utilities, measure, distance. Let's turn off the snap. Yeah, okay, so it's 8 3/16, 6, so 5 10. So about 11/64 of an inch is what this is off. It's encroaching into the space 11/64. So we would need to add basically another 3/16 to our 5/16 for this. So the answer is 5/16.3125, and it was plus 0.16875 is kind of where we were, and that's going to put us at almost a 1/2 inch. And if we're going to add a typical 1/8 of an inch, that dimension is going to need to be 5/8 of an inch is the margin. And when we put that vertical axis of pivoting here, 2 9/16, and then 2 3/4 from the jam. Now, let's move our vertical axis of pivoting 2 3/4 over, but then only 1.5 inches up rather than 2 3/4. Let's see what happens now. Let's turn our grid back on. We got our snap on. Okay, so let's modify, rotate, select objects, Okay, I've got the object I'm going to rotate. Enter, specify base point. So that base point needs to be 3 inch from the inch and a half from the x-axis, and 3 3/4 from the y-axis, and inch and a half from the 3 3/4 from the x, inch and a half from the y. There is our point. Let's turn off our grid and our snap, our ortho, sorry. Yeah, you can see that my 5/16 is way too large. Way too large. Let's take our jam, which grid, snap, move, specify displacement. I'm going to go with 3/16. That's not what I want. Specify base point displacement. I don't remember the move function very well. Obviously. So let's do this. We know that we had 5/16. Let's make this 1/8 by taking our frame and simply moving it over. All right. Now, basically what I've done is made the jam 15/16 thick, whatever. We can make it smaller if we need to. Let's verify that we have 1/8 of an inch. Utilities, measure, quick. Quick is no good. Utilities, measure, distance. Yeah, 1/8 of an inch. That's what we've got. Okay, so now let's rotate. Let's modify, rotate, select your objects, okay, enter, specify the base point. We want to have from here, it needs to be 2 3/4, so 1 3/16, 3 3/16, so it's going to be 3 15/16 over. 2.75 plus 1.1875. Yeah, 3 15/16. So our base point is going to be 3 15/16 from the y-axis and 1.5 inches from the x-axis. That's our point. Let's turn off snap and grid. Yeah. I mean, it's just absolutely no problem like that. In fact, you can see that you'll get, I won't beleaguer this video by trying to determine what that angle is, but I know that there's an easy way to do it. So we're gonna get a really good amount. In fact, he doesn't need to go with 1.5 inch radius. If we move the vertical axis of pivoting 1.5 inches from the face of the door, and then per the template at 2 3/4, in fact, the client would be able to get by with less than 1/8. I mean, in fact, you're going to get by with, nominally 0. Now, the issue is two and 3/4 and then 2 9/16. The hardware is 2-inch wide. So that means it's 1 inch here. So what that really means is he's going to see some of the hardware here sticking out. And I frankly don't think that that's really going to matter that much. So 1.5 inches. So if we put it at 2.5, let's do this. If we made the hardware such that the jamb came in measure distance. So basically 1 5/16, 2 5/16. Let's say that we went up 2 5/16 from the x-axis, and then 2 3/4 over. 2 5/16, and then 2 3/4. So let's rotate. Modify, rotate. Select objects. Okay. Enter. Specify base point. It's going to be 3 15/16 over from that jamb, and then 2 5/16 from the x-axis. Snap. 2 5/16 from the x, 3 15 from the y. That's our point of rotation. Okay. So now, what we see here is, yeah, we're gonna need more. Utilities, measure distance, just not being super technical. That's 1/8 of an inch. So that would be a 1/4 inch. Quarter-inch margin would do it if the vertical axis of pivoting was such that the floor plate came right here, so that you really didn't see it. So we're biasing it towards 2 5/16 from the x-axis when it would normally be 2 9/16. 3, so it's only a 1/4 inch shifted. So it really depends on where they want to put it. So if it was me, I mean, we knew that we were going to need a 1/2 inch gap with 1.5 inch radius. We knew that. To have it at 2 3/4 over and then in the center of the door. All the way to 0 if we were to move the vertical axis, well, to 1.5 inches. We go to 2 5/16, so we know we're going to need a 1/4 inch. So that's the decision the client will have to make. But 1.5 inch radius would be no problem. Actually, if the pivot point was brought out here, if he flushed the hardware off here and we went 1 inch in, 1 3/4 over, his radius could be very, very small. I mean, well, let's figure it out. If we flushed the floor bracket, and what I mean by that is if we took the 2 inch wide massive bracket at the bottom, which is extremely thick, it's 1/2 inch thick, and we flush that here, then we're going to be at 1 inch and 2 3/4. So let's see what we would need. So now let's just rotate it because we already have it drawn. modify, rotate, select objects, base point, snap on, grid on. So we're going to be at 3 15/16. And then 1 inch in. I mean, you can see that that rotation is that margin is going to be super tiny. Let's take a look. Let's run this. Oops. Now we've got that put back together as a door, so to speak. Let's grab a circle now, just to see what that looks like. Let's grab a circle. Let's turn on our grid again. And let's say that it's a typical 3/4 inch radius. Should be 1 5/16, and then 3/4. Utilities, measure, radius, 3/4 inch radius. Okay, let's modify, let's trim this. Now we've got a 3/4 inch radius. Let's put our pivot point, let's rotate, let's select our object, enter, let's specify our base point. Again, 3 15/16, and then 3/4 up. So 3 15/16, 3/4 inch, okay, so that is going to be our 3/4 and then 3 15/16. Okay, so rotate, select objects. Oops, don't want to rotate all of it. Base point, 3 15, 3/4 inch. Yeah, that works out really well. I mean, you need nothing. In fact, let's rotate the base point where it would normally be, just to see how much it would be. It would, we're at, I think it was 5/16. Let's rotate. Let's select our objects. Base point, So 3 and 15, and then 2 and 9/16. Yeah, you're gonna need a ton of room if you only use a 3/4. Now, one thing that you'll see in the old catalogs is where they would actually concave the jamb. That's another way to do this. Let's do this. Let's extend that to 5 1/8. Let's extend that to 42. Great. Let's go with a pivot point that is 1 inch up from the x-axis. Rotate, select objects. Base point, it's going to be 3 and 15 and then 1 inch. You move that. If you move that vertical axis of pivoting such that the hardware is here, you flush it right here, you're going to need very little additional room. So let's see what a 1/4 inch does. Let's draw a circle, center radius. Sorry. Circle, radius. To let's say a 1/4 inch radius. Let's trim here, here, here. Let's rotate. ROT. Let's select our object. Let's give it our base point, which is going to be 1 and 15 and then 1 inch from the x-axis. Yeah, that would be good. Let's turn off our grid and our snap. Yeah, it's going to be really tight. So that's a 1/4 inch radius. Let's see what that actually becomes. Appears to be pretty close right there. Let's just leave it there. Let's get in here and measure that. Utilities measure quick. Nope. Utilities measure distance. Okay, so that's really small. That is a 90th of an inch. Yeah. So that's going to need to get bigger. Obviously, we're going to need to get that out to 1/8 of an inch. So maybe a 1/2 inch radius. Let's try that. Why wouldn't we? Let's try a 1/2 inch radius. Draw, circle, center radius. we're dealing with 8, 11, so 1, and 1 and 13/16. Half-inch radius. So we're dealing with three and 15/16, then a half-inch up. So half-inch radius. Draw circle, center radius. So from here, half-inch radius. Let's turn off that's, well, not just yet. Let's trim. Okay. Let's put our rotate command. Let's select our object. Let's now give it our base point, 3 and 15, and then 1 inch up. 3 and 15, and 1 inch. There it is. Let's turn off our snap and our grid. Oh yeah. Half-inch radius, move that vertical axis of pivoting order over. Measure distance. Looks like it's about closest here. So that's a 1/16 of an inch. So 3/8 radius would probably work really well. Oh, pardon me. Maybe a 5/8 radius. If you wanted an 1/8 of an inch margin there. Draw circle, center radius, so 2 and 1/16. I had that wrong, but that's okay. 5/8 radius. Let's move it over. Okay, let's trim. Trim, modify trim, select objects. Okay, now we're going to put our pivot back to where we've been talking about, 3 and 15/16, and then 1 inch. Select objects. Okay, 3 and 15. and then 1 inch. Turn off our snap and our grid. Oh, that looks good. Looks like it's pretty close there. Let's measure that. Utilities measure distance. So almost 330 seconds with a 5/8 radius. So 3/4 is probably what we're dealing with. Draw circle, center radius, .75. Let's move it to where we need. Let's trim. Modify trim. Okay, let's rotate. Let's select our objects. Okay. Enter specified base point. So now we've got a 3/4 inch radius. We're going to go 3 and 15 and 1 inch. Turn off our snap and our grid. Yeah. 3/4 inch radius. Let's see what that looks like now. Yeah, right about there is where it's going to be closest. Let's utilities measure quick. Utilities measure distance. Yeah, almost 1/8 of an inch. Very, very close to 1/8 of an inch. So that's a 3/4 inch radius. About a 7/8 radius. Let's do it. Draw circle, center radius, 0.875. Let's place it where we need. Let's modify, trim that, trim that. Modify trim that. Escape, rotate, select objects, enter, base point 3 and 15 and then 1 inch. Turn off, turn off. Let's see. Yeah, I have no problem with this at all. You're not. That looks like to be about as close as it gets. Measure quick, measure distance. Bingo. 1/8 of an inch. Close enough. 0.122. So 7/8 radius. If you flush the hardware here, 7/8 radius. If you flush the hardware here. If you don't, you're going to need a much bigger gap based on 1.5 inches. I don't recall what it was. I think it was about 1/2 inch. If you move that pivot point to the center of the thickness of the door. So, depending on how little of the hardware the client wants to see, if you don't mind seeing a little bit of the hardware in this space here, you're going to be fine. I would just use a 7/8 radius, maybe a 1 inch radius, and then you'll have, you'll be in better shape with the gap. But I think that's really all you need on this. So the question becomes is, where is the client willing to put the vertical axis of pivoting in relationship to the pull side of the door? We know that the 2 3/4 is fixed from the jamb. We know that. We're getting that from the fact that the hardware is built only for this, and it's here. This is our bottom bracket. Nothing we can do about the fact from the face of this to the vertical axis of pivoting is 3/4. That's fixed. But what we can do is play with where in the depth we can place it. So I have nothing to add. If additional information comes to light about how the client wants us to tweak that dimension, we will update this. Thank you very much.
I'm going to make some CMT, Freud, white side. White side won't make anything bigger. I think it has to do with revolution at the bottom of the router. They wouldn't tell me, but so I was wondering if you could run that spec through the computer when you get a chance, and let me know the offset.
The gap between the edge of the door.
Yeah.
Okay, so what router, what radius are you going to use?
1.5 inches.
Okay, that's no problem.
All right, thank you.
Oh, bye. You're welcome, sir. Bye-bye.
Right. Thing yet. I tried opening it last week and I didn't have enough time to sit down. What's the rough offset off the jamb?
Yeah, so I wanted to just call and break it down. So it depends. So if you were to put the pivot point in the center of the thickness of the door like it's shown on the template.
Right, that's what I plan on. Yeah.
Okay, you're going to need every bit of a 1/2 inch. I'd have to.
Really?
It may have been closer to 9/16.
Oh.
And as I'm playing with all of that, I'm thinking to myself, well, why don't you suck the pivot point out closer to the pull side of the opening?
Yeah.
And if you were to take the big giant bottom L bracket
yeah.
and flush that off to the face, I think you could get the radius down to 7/8. Now that's an awful.
Okay, but how far off of the jamb would I be with the slab?
That gap would be like 1/8 of an inch or something small.
Now, okay, I'm just thinking this through my head now. So say that bottom bracket. Now, I mean, I gotta set it back a little bit from the face of the door so I don't come through the veneers,
Yeah, of course, sure.
So what are you talking? 1/4 inch or 3/8 at least, or?
No, it'd be less than that. You really
from
move
the
that
face of the door?
Point.
Yeah.
Yeah, you pull it all the way out. I realize I gave you a fire hose when all you wanted was a glass of water, but you can move that pivot point. So 2 3/4 from the jamb over, that's always fixed, obviously. But if you were to pull that, not going in the center of the thickness, further you pull it to the face of the door on the pull side, the smaller the radius gets, is the bottom line.
Okay, so then, I would think at minimal a quarter-inch back from the face of the door because you want to have those veneers still stay on the door,
Well, on the jamb. Yeah.
Right.
The jamb.
Well, the jamb, not necessarily the door. I don't want to be, seeing raw metal on the top and bottom of the jamb on the door slab because you pulled the pivot point forward, right?
Well, when the door is closed, if you were to look down between the radius part of the door and the jamb, you're going to see a little bit of hardware. So No.
I'm not saying. I'm saying the edge of the metal bracket itself. You're saying
you're
it
pull. You're going to hold back a quarter-inch. I know, so that you're not mortising all the way through the face of the jamb. You don't want to see that.
Right. Well, no, the slab.
The slab is not a problem because it's just the arm that's down there.
Yeah. Okay. It depends on the width of the material too. The metal. I haven't measured it. 7/8 radius. You think will work then at that point?
It will. If you were to tell me where this, if you were to tell me where you're going to place it, we know it's 2 3/4 from the jamb. If you tell me where from the face of the door you're going to put it, I will give you a 10-second absolute answer. So, meaning, take your time, figure it out, and I will give you the actual direct. Here's the not 1 hour version answer. Here's the 10-second answer.
Okay. Well, like I said, I opened it up and I just didn't have the time to lay it all out and think it through, but what I'm still going to do once I get this thing, I've decided I've got to make up a 5 1/4 inch rectangle with the radius on it and mount the brackets into that and then make up a dummy jamb.
Yeah.
And, mount the whole thing that way to see how it all works. Because I just cannot screw up the slab and the jamb, mortising the thing in. Obviously, I won't be able to. I don't know if I don't have a stud wall I can screw this thing to. That's the only problem. This dummy jamb I make to see how I'd like to stand it upright and just see how the whole thing operates. In retrospect, you had mentioned that sauce hinges. We had that discussion briefly, and maybe I should have went that route. I probably would have pulled myself in closer to the jamb without having to deal with the radius. I just, I had the jamb already in, and I was thinking pivot would be the easiest, but then the size of the door, I had no idea on the radius, and then the distance, I was trying to keep as close to the jamb as possible. So, if we can get it to work within an 1/8, 3/16 of the jamb, because the thing is, we get further away, you're losing heat out of the sauna room through that gap, and the back side of the door is going to flush up with the cedar. It's going to have cedar on it, so you can't put a stop on this. I was going to put a floor stop on it so that when you shut it, you don't see the stop.
You could put an overhead concealed stop if you want to really punish yourself with more machining.
Well, yeah, not particularly, to be honest with you. I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah.
I still got to figure out how I'm going to lift this 250-pound slab and get it in position. So that's another whole issue. But, so I'm slowly working my way through this. I got to put the veneers on the exterior, on each side of the slabs. I have epoxy together, and then I was going to, if 7/8 radius is better than 1 1/4 inch, if I can obtain a bit, 7/8 radius, and I'll have to look at that angle again too, So
you figure out where you're going to place that vertical axis of pivoting, and I'm going to give you here's the boom, 10 seconds done.
Well, I want to be within an 1/8 or a quarter inch at the maximum off the jamb when I'm all said and done with the slab. That's, to me, that's, 1/8 inch would be better, but I don't know if we could even achieve that, with it being set back from the face of the slab.
Just give me that dimension, and I'll tell you what you have to have to have like an 1/8 of an inch or 3/16. What radius you'll need to have.
Mm-hmm. So you want me to give it to you now, then, or?
No, sir. You can just send me an email or call me back.
Well.
No, take your time.
Well, I mean, like I just said, an eighth or 3/16 would be ideal.
What I don't want to do is try to figure out where you should put your pivot point based on that.
Okay, so I'm misunderstanding you then. So what do you want from me?
So the vertical axis of pivoting is going to fall on the floor based on two dimensions. You know you're 2 3/4 over from the jam over, but then from the if you touch the face of the door, how far back into the door thickness will you place it?
Well, those two dimensions should be the same as the jam, correct? So you pivot at the same time.
Well,
am I not thinking the same way you are with this, or what? I don't.
Well, if you imagine your door in just in plan view, you've got 5 1/8 and then whatever 36-inch wide, and you put your pencil down somewhere in that giant rectangle. You know it's going to be 2 3/4 from the edge, but within the 5 1/8 inch thickness, where is it? So I need an X and Y coordinate of where the vertical.
Well, that's going to depend on that hardware width. I don't want to come through the face of the slab, which I don't have in front of me. I'm on a job. I don't have all that in front of me. All
right, no, I get it. I'm just saying, when you figure out where that is, I will, based on an eighth of an inch or whatever you tell me you want as a margin, I'll tell you what radius you need to have. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll have to look at it in relation to the slab and the jam. All right. Thanks a lot. I'll be in touch. Yep.
If it helps, I'm gonna be here Saturday. If that's a good day for you to be able to focus on stuff like this, as it is for me, my phone's not ringing. I make myself completely available.
Okay. At this number?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Or just send me an email and tell me to call you. Yes, sir.
It's better for me the old-fashioned way. All right. Thanks a lot. Yep.
You bet. Thanks, Tom.
Bye.
Okay, according to the conversation that we just had with the client, it's pretty clear what he wants to do is... It sounds like what he wants to do is draw all of the hardware out such that we leave a 1/4 inch here. Okay, so that's going to move this pivot point down 5 1/8 divided by 2, 5 1/8 times 0.5. What's wrong? Okay, I understand. Okay. Five 1/8 divided by 2 is 2 9/16. Okay, 2 9/16. So that's 2 9/16. We're going to draw this down such that the bracket is a 1/4 inch from the jamb. Okay. So we know that the pivoting axis is 2 9/16 from the face of the door. Our bracket is 2 inch, and that's centered at 2 9/16 as well. So the easier way to approach this would be that we're simply going to place, because the axis of pivoting is right in the middle of the jamb bracket, we're going to place it at 1 1/4 inches from the face of the jamb, 1 1/4 inches over. Okay? And then, of course, at 2 3/4 over from the jamb, and the idea is to see what sort of radius that we need to have here. So let's dive into that. I have a different drawing that's here. I was working on another project for a client, determining something quite similar. So let's draw our bracket. Let's just so we know that will be a 1/4 inch, and it's a 1/2 inch deep. So let's just draw in our bracket. Let's just make a polyline. We know that we're going to be a 1/4 inch up, so our origin is 0, 0. Our minor lines are 1/16 of an inch, so our major lines are 1/4 inch. So we're going to have a line here. Oops. We're going to have a polyline that's going to start here. Whoop. Why are we starting from the origin? So we're going to be at our line is going to be at 0. All right, so this is going to draw. This is going to show us our jam bracket. Is the bottom line. The problem with this issue, what's the problem? The problem is this isn't going to work. Not at all. Well, no, it'll work. Yeah, it'll work. Okay, so let's just continue on. Forgive me, I was thinking something wrong for a second there. There's our bracket. We have to bring our door flush to the face of the jamb because that's what the client wants. So we're going to get rid of this existing door that I have here. Okay, now we're going to draw a door, and what we'll do right now is the client, I think he was thinking 1/4 inch margin. So let's draw a door. Let's draw a polyline, and that polyline is going to start from 1/4 inch from the y-axis, and then 0. Okay. Oh, let's try that again. Polyline. We're going to start here. We're going to go to 5 1/8. We're then going to go to, again, I don't recall the width. Let's just say that it's 35 1/2. I know that it wasn't earlier, but 5 1/8. Then back to 35 1/2. Okay, now we have an object here that's a door. Okay. This bracket is it's 7 9/16 past the vertical axis of pivoting, which from the jamb is 2 3/4. So 7 9/16. So two, okay, here we go. So 10 5/16. And it's 1 3/4 wide. So maybe what we'll do is we'll draw that in for the sake of adding it. Maybe what we'll do is we'll draw that in slightly. Yeah, anyway, we don't need that there to get the idea of what our radius needs to be. So if this is going to be 1/4 inch, this is going to be 1/4 inch. We know that our pivot of axis is going to be 1 1/4 inches from the face of the jamb, right? Yeah, it's right in the center line. Okay, so it'll be 1.25 inches over. So let's rotate this. Rotate, select the object, enter. Our base point is going to be 1.25 inches. 2 3/4, and then 1.25 inches. Okay. Yeah, he's not going to need much at all. Not going to be much of a radius whatsoever. Let's just see what that does right there. Measure distance. Turn off our snap. It's tiny. 0.04 inch. It's tiny. Alright, now let's create a, I don't know, 1/2 inch radius. Half-inch radius. Let's check what I just did. Yeah, okay, so it's basically 1/2 inch. Let's trim the pieces we don't need. Okay. Let's rotate. Oops, we did something wrong there. What were we doing? Trimming? Let's rotate. Select our objects. Now, our point was 1.25 inches and then 2 3/4. 2 3/4, 1.25 inches. Yeah, right there. So that's based on a 1/4 inch margin. Sorry. Rotate. Select our objects. Two 3/4, 1.25 inches. Measure distance. Measure distance. Just zooming in, we can see that that's a 1/16 of an inch. So you're about 90 thousandths, something in that range. So it's a bit tight, I would think, of what you're going to end up needing. So I would suggest that let's change that radius to 3/4 inch. Circle. That end point is going to be, yeah, 1 inch up. Yeah, we got it right. All right, let's trim. Let's rotate. Let's give it a base point. It's going to be 2 3/4, 1.25 inches. I have my snap-on. Yeah, it's going to be 3/16 with a 3/4 inch. So could you get by with 1/8 of an inch? Yeah, nominally. Encroaches into that space a little bit. So that's 3/16 based on a 3/4 inch radius. Let's make it a 1 inch radius. Circle. Again, 2 3/4, 1 1/4. No, that's not right. 2 3/4. 1 inch radius. It has to be 2 3/4 from the jamb. An 1 1/4 from the x-axis. Basically 1 inch radius. Let's trim that 1 inch radius. Yeah, it doesn't perfectly line up there. So what we'll do is we will just go to rotate, and then we'll select our objects. And then we give it 2 3/4, and then 1 1/4. And we got way more room than necessary. Yeah, you could do if you did a 1 inch radius, you could definitely get by with 1/8 of an inch and have some margin left over. So I think the answer really is 3/4 inch radius. Let's try that one more time. Let's trim. Let's rotate. 2 3/4, 1 1/4. Yeah, if you had 1/8 of an inch margin and you went with a 3/4 inch radius, you have just enough left over there. All right, let's draw in a couple of details here. So we know that arm is 9 19/30 and 7/16 over. And that it's 1 3/4 wide, so that's 7/8. So let's do that. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my template up on a different monitor so I can see it while I do this. So let's get our .75, then 1.25 inches. Let's make a 1/16 of an inch circle, 2 3/4, 1.25 inches, 0.0625. Okay, so that's going to be our vertical axis of pivoting, the center of that tiny little circle there. So then what we're going to do is we're going to come up with we'll draw the rest of our bracket, and that leg is not well shown. The bottom arm isn't really well shown at all. The jam bracket doesn't, we don't have the exact dimension of it, so we'll just give us something here that represents, oops, what we're doing. So that's our jam bracket. The jam, it's a big L-shaped bracket. So now we're going to draw our arm over it, which we know to be which we know to be 7/8. Then from the vertical axis of pivoting, we know it's 7/16. Pardon me, 7 9/16. And then that's going to be 1 3/4. Come back to 7 9/16. Actually, and then it's, well, actually, no, we don't want that. We want 9. It's about 9 5/8. Then 1 3/4. And back here. So that's going to be our bottom arm, what we've drawn there. So this outside rectangle is going to be the bracket. This is the arm sitting underneath the door. Let's rotate this just to show it a little bit differently. And I think that we still have that 3/4 inch radius on the door. So let's select our objects that we're going to rotate. Enter. Specify base point. By now we have that memorized. Yeah. It's looking good. You know, 3/16. If you were to, I mean, the ultimate question is, what is the client going to leave? And if he leaves 1/8 of an inch, he's got a 1/16 of an inch breather. Pardon me. If he leaves an eighth of an, yeah, if he leaves an eighth of an inch, you're going to have almost a 16th of an inch breather left over. Okay. Measure radius. Yeah, 3/4 radius is what that is. 3/4 radius. Okay, so the next part of this video will be a very brief summary to the client. Okay, Tom, here's the summary. So if you put a 3/4 inch radius on the edge of the door and you position your bracket a 1/4 inch from the face of the jamb, what you're seeing here is the jamb bracket. This highlighted item here in blue. This. That's your jamb bracket. Everything you see here, that's your arm underneath the door. I've kicked it back. I've held it back a 1/4 inch, which means our pivoting axis is 1 1/4 inches in from the face of the door and then 2 3/4 from the jamb. If I rotate all of this, you'll see that with a 3/4 inch radius out here, you can do 1/8 of an inch, and you'll have about a 16th of an inch to spare. Let's prove that. So we're going to specify our base point of our rotation. We are going to, we're going to rotate. We're going to select our objects first, forgive me. Yeah, we got everything. Now we're going to give it our base point, our point of rotation. Let's turn off our stuff. So what you're seeing here is, what's not moving is the jamb bracket. Okay, now I'm going to put my grid back on. These grid lines are all 1/16 of an inch from each other. So there's 4 here. There's 2. This is a major and this is a major. That's a 1/4 inch. So when I get the door over here, if you were to leave 1/8 of an inch, right here is 1/8 of an inch. Right here, you're going to have basically a 16th to spare if you put a 3/4 inch radius and you hold it back a 1/4 inch. That's the short version.
Quarter inch of the opening side of the slab with the hardware and the jamb.
Yeah, that was the video I sent you this morning showing.
Oh, you did? Oh, I didn't even know you sent me one. You said we could talk on a Saturday, I was just out in my shop looking at things and laying things out, and yeah, I think the 1/4 inch is probably the safest.
So what I did earlier this morning, coincidentally, is I just drew it up really quick. I recorded it and I sent it to you, holding it a 1/4 inch back from the face of the jamb. All you need in that point is a 3/4 inch radius on the roundover. And actually, you could probably even get by with, well, you'll see it. It's super straightforward.
Okay, then I'll look at that. I appreciate it. Sure.
With a 1/4 inch, that's going to allow you a 3/4 inch roundover radius. That is going to really give you the ability to have an 1/8 or 3/16 margin. An 1/8 will work. You'll have almost a 16th of an inch to play with, and you're there.
Well, the only thing is I'm talking to you and thinking this through in my head. With that radius, you said how big was the radius I'd have to use?
3/4 inch.
If that's going to push the hardware back from the face, because you might see, putting the radius on, you'll see the hardware.
In the video, I just drew some rude lines. You will see a small amount of it. That is true. When the door's closed, you'll see a small amount of the floor bracket.
Okay. Okay, I thought because I'm taking off that 3/4 radius, it'll push me back further than a 1/4, and it'll come into the hardware itself, you know.
Not what's going to be installed in the door, because your door is so not the bottom arm. You'll see a little bit of the floor plate.
Okay, I'll have to review what you sent me. I didn't realize you sent me something. Okay.
Yeah. And by all means, if you want to tweak that, just either call me or reply to the email, and I'll throw it back into AutoCAD and send it back to you.
Okay, I'll review it. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
If I bring it within that quarter, how narrow did the slab of the door have to be in relation to the jamb at that point? A 1/4 inch space, did we say, reveal around it, or what? Or 1/8 inch, excuse me, with that 1 1/4 radius? Or, excuse me, wait, the 3/4 radius, right?
Yeah, I'd have to look at it again, but you're either very right or very close. I think a 3/16 gap between the door and the jamb is going to be adequate.
Okay, because what I'm doing is I built a mock-up of the jamb in my shop, and then I built a mock-up of the door in my shop, thickness, and I was going to route the radius on it and fit all the hardware in the mock-up and see how the thing works in the mock-up. And if it works all right, then I was going to proceed to go into the actual job and do it there.
Do you want me to review that and send you the absolute?
Well, I'll do the 3/16 and try it. I mean, I think that's realistic. I don't need you to do that again. That's all right. Hey, I got another job where floating shelves. Do you have any hardware for that you like to use, or what?
For shelves?
Floating shelves, that latest trend where people like to have no brackets or anything and that are visible. I didn't know if you had any hardware you like to use in situations like that.
I don't. That's not my area of expertise, and it's not what my company gets called for.
Okay. All right. No problem. I was just curious. Figured I had you on the line. No problem. Okay. All right. Thanks a lot. I'll do the 3/16. Thanks a lot. Yep.
Talk
Bye.
to you next week. Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Bye. Oh no, yeah, those are my people. Jessica sent that over. She's in Memphis.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
She's my weather stripping expert.
She's your what? I'm sorry?
Weather stripping. She used to work for a major weather stripping manufacturer.
Oh, okay. Good. Okay, so I did everything you said on a demonstration. It doesn't work. What's happening is, this is what I did. I basically built a rectangle of the jamb width, okay? And I made a rectangle of the door slab with 3/16 all 4 edges away from the jamb. And I put the radius on the door slab, the demonstration, and it won't open because it'll hit the jamb still. It's got to be further away from the jamb. The 3/16 is not going to work.
Well, I must be plotting something in AutoCAD that's not dimensionally accurate.
Yeah, I have this. They had it before. I forget what the hell off the jamb. I look at their initial instructions, but I can't. It'll hit on the strike side. It just won't. It won't. It'll hit the jamb.
Oh yeah, for sure on the strike side. You're going to have to put a heavy bevel on that, or you're going to have to build that jamb so that there's like a. Yeah, you'll have to put quite a heavy bevel on the other side. I didn't AutoCAD the strike side, but I can do so and send it to you.
Well, I mean, I got to get this thing to work, but I can't have, 1/2 inch or 3/4 gaps around the door. It kind of defeats the purpose.
Well, I mean, you've got to take, you have to pay attention to both styles naturally. I assumed it was, I almost thought we talked about the strike side, but yeah, you'd have to put a greater than 3-degree bevel on that. It couldn't stay square is the bottom line. You'd have to cut that back.
All right. You want me to start off with a 3-degree bevel on it, or what?
You could, but it's going to need more than that because of the door thickness. It's an easy thing for me to put in AutoCAD. I will do that and I'll send it to you. I'll just figure out what that degree needs to be and send it to you.
The whole premise of the pivot initially was the weight of the door, and I was trying not to have any stops anywhere on the door, so that when you read the cedar on the interior of the sauna, it flushes up on the interior as well as the exterior hallway. The wall coverings, it keeps the wall plane in the same plane.
What's the interior of the sauna? Is it the pull side or the push side?
No, that's the push side.
Okay. Well, I mean, you're going to need to have something. Well, what you could do is basically build the jamb to be parallel with the edge of the door.
Well, the jamb is already installed too. That's the other thing. The cedar's all in the sauna. The jamb's installed. Remember, I said I had that installed. I didn't plan on putting a bevel on the strike side, but I obviously going to have to. So that's going to pull me off of the strike side more inside the sauna too. And I'm starting to get all these air gaps around basically a door that I was trying to not have that far off of the jamb.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, of course. Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize it was a sauna. I don't think you won't need to have it beveled the entire way. There'll be a certain amount that you wouldn't need to, but it would for sure be probably 2/3 of the door thickness.
Yeah.
So until I put it in AutoCAD, I don't know what the bevel would be. I know that I would expect it to be something like 5 degree, but I don't know until I put it in there. I will put it in and let you know.
Okay. Well, let's try to shoot for that 3/16 as we're if we can maintain that,
Well, it's just a function of the mechanics of the math.
I understand that, but I don't know, when you do that, but I'm curious. It probably end up being 3/4 on the inside. 5.
No, I don't think it'll be that much. Because I've done 12-inch wide hinges for customers on 1 3/4 thick doors, and the bevel was heavy, but not obscenely heavy. So I'll just plot this out and I'll send it to you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Okay, the challenge that we have now is to figure out, it wasn't very obvious that the client needed help with the latch side. We were able to determine what to do over on the strike side, and quite frankly, I'm just going to leave this alone. I won't put the radius on there because I don't frankly recall what it was, but I do need to dig up what that pivot point was, so I'm going to pull up the template. And I've got that template pulled up. Because I don't remember what our pivot... Okay, we were holding at 1/4 inch back, so we're going to be at 1 1/4 from the face of the jamb and then 2 3/4 over. Okay, so our pivot point will be 1 1/4 in and then 2 3/4 over. So what we need to do now is we need to build ourselves a jamb over on this side, and that's our task. I don't recall what our dimensions were, so let's take a look of what we've got there. Utilities measure, okay, quick 42 and then 5 1/8. Okay, that jamb 15/16 and 7-inch. I don't recall making it that, but okay, let's check out what we're doing here. So an 1/8 of an inch margin is what we've got. So what we need to do is, it doesn't matter what we're doing over here. What we're going to do is we're going to draw ourselves, this is going to be our origin. And what we have is an 1/8 of an inch and then a 42-inch door. Okay, so we're going to put a jamb at 42 and 5/16 from the origin over, because we're going to leave this 1/8 of an inch here, but we're going to start with 3/16 on the other side. Doesn't matter what happens on this side again. It just doesn't matter what happens here. You know, what that's going to look like. So let's draw ourselves a polyline. This was 15/16 by 7 inch. So draw polyline. 42 and 15/16. No. (42 and 15/16) and 0. So we're going to go 15/16. That's just quite arbitrary. We're going to make it 7 at 0. Nope. 7 at 90. Then we're going to make it 15/16 at 180. Then we're going to make it 7 at 90. Okay, now we've got a jamb there. Okay, great. So our pivot point needs to be from the origin, and I want to write that down. 40, pardon me, it's going to be 2 3/4 from the y-axis over, and then it's going to be 1 1/4 from the x-axis. So let's rotate just to see what we're going to look like. Rotate, select objects as you know. Base point is going to be at 2 3/4 Yeah, 2 3/4 from the origin, and then 1 1/4. Rotate, select our object, enter. 2 3/4. An 1 1/4. All right, now we have a rotating object. Yeah, okay. So the bottom line is it's not what the client's concern is it's going to hit. And in fact, it's not really that bad. I mean, it's certainly going to hit. But there's no bevel on this at all. So yeah, sure, it hits. I'm thinking the client needs just a 3-degree bevel. So it's at 3/16, so he doesn't want to really increase that at all. It's going to be It's going to be 5/16 for sure. So what I would propose that the client does is 5/16, 3-degree bevel to here and straight across. So what we're going to do is let's alter our object in the sense of, let's just draw a new door. So we need a polyline. Draw polyline. Give it an origin here. So we're going to be at 1/8 of an inch. And we're going to go up 5 1/8 at 90 degree. Then we're going to go get rid of these grid lines. Actually, (3/16), so let's go 41 and 13/16, 0. Then we're going to come down 2 and 9/16, half of the door thickness at 87 degrees. Then we're going to come half of the door thickness at 90 degree. Then we're going to come hopefully 42 at 90 degree. Nope. At 80 degree. Yep. Where does that put us over here? Yeah. Looks good. Looks reasonably good. 42, I may have pushed that out a little bit too far. All right, let's take a dimension and see what we got. So this is the concept of what we're talking about here. Manage, sorry. Utilities measure quick. Yeah, and I don't know the actual door thickness. I don't. I'm guessing it's 42, but yeah, we're about 5 1/8. I mean, it's not quite 5 1/8, but it is. Forgive me, it's right here. I was going to say if it's not 5 1/8, it's really close to it. So what we've done is we've treated it like this, and what we're getting in here is dimensions, measure, distance, 3/8. Okay, so let's see what 3/8 does. A little heavy on there. Let's do modify, rotate, select the object, enter, base point, 2 3/4, and then 1 1/4. Okay, we've got that selected. Let's get rid of the lines. Let's see what it looks like over here. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No problem. I mean, gets a little close, not too much. Looks like its minimum point is when the door is about 4.5 inches open, would be my guess. So let's measure that. Utilities, measure, distance. (3/16). Yeah, okay. So the bottom line is you could probably make it 5/16. And that would still work. meaning rather than a 3-degree bevel here, probably put a 2-degree bevel from here to here. That would probably work. So we're going with 3/16 over here. If we're going to leave 3/16 here, then that's what we're doing. So our pivot point 2 3/4 and a 2 3/4 from the Y, 1 1/4 from the X. Halfway through the thickness of the door, and in fact, we could start that maybe, 60% of the way into the door and then go back on a 3-degree bevel. But if we're just going to make it 3/16 clear on that pivot point, then that's what we're going to submit. And 3/16 is only because kind of that's what we were planning over on this side, even though it's drawn at 1/8 of an inch. I could have simply moved that jamb over. It doesn't matter. So that's what we're going to suggest to the client. Thank you. Okay, Tom, here's what I've drawn. Basically, I've got your door, 5 1/8 inch door, a couple of jamb sections, and what I've done is I've taken the 5 1/8 inch door, utilities, measure, quick. I've taken your 5 1/8 inch thick door, and basically I've gone to half of the thickness, 2 9/16, and from that point I've started a 3-degree bevel on it, right here. 3-degree bevel. So what that's giving us is, that's giving us 3/8 of an inch right here. It's given us 3/8 of an inch. So your gap on that side is going to be 3/8. Now let's rotate it. And I've got it rotated now in the space, so let's take a look. That point of rotation is 2 3/4 from the y-axis over, and then 1 1/4 from the x-axis. So over on this side, this is what it's going to look like. Down here, where it gets closest to the jamb, that 3/8 dimension up in the closed position, right down about here where it's at its narrowest, utilities, measure, distance, it's 3/16 of an inch. That's what that's showing. So the bottom line is, if you were to take your door, go halfway through the thickness, and then begin a 3-degree bevel, you're going to be 3/16 of an inch. Now, what you could consider doing, because you could take that down by another 1/8 of an inch. That eighth of an inch is probably not going to give you much, it might get you to 5/16 over here, but that's what we're looking at right there. Now I realize you don't want to have a stop, or at least I believe you mentioned that. Over on the strike side, you need some way to prevent the door from swinging in unintentionally. So you need to have something there. And if you were to apply a very small stop, say 1/2 of an inch projection in something quite thin, it may not look awful, and it would sure give you a more elegant way to seal the door. And what you could do, that's 3/8 of an inch there. Now what you could do to help with how that looks is you could bring in something like, and I would, you know what would work out really well? And it would work really well in your sauna application, would be some spring bronze or V cushion, bronze weather stripping. Bear with me. I'm not saying you should, could, or would, but that would do a couple of things. It will allow you to You could toss in a piece of spring cushion like this. They don't really have, a spring cushion you would nail onto the jamb, and that's how you would seal that. And it's obviously non-ferrous, so it's really not going to, you won't have trouble with the application. But it would sure help with the line of sight, and it would give you some sense of seal. So it would look something like this, obviously. 3/8 is a lot to close off. You might have to tip that out towards you, or you could do a V cushion like this, and you could nail that on with copper nails. Or what you could do is use a teardrop style material like this. It's self-adhesive. I don't know that I love that idea. It's only 1/4 inch at its maximum, so you'd probably have to bring that back in here. But you know what? It would close off the line of sight. It really would. I realize that the jamb is already in. Another thing that you may be able to consider doing is taking your table saw and tipping that blade at 3 degrees and then adding a piece of trim here to bring that, maybe closed off over here. That's, not probably going to be a great idea, but that corner is not going to get in till about here. Why don't I rotate that again? Okay, we've got that rotated. Let's take a look and see what kind of, you really could. You could add a piece of trim, take your table saw and tip the blade over and run a board vertically and then nail and screw something that would basically be triangular shaped and fill in this area right here and come back like this. I don't know that I'd want to do that, but it would work. It would certainly give you the illusion of closing that gap off, because that pivot point's going to be down here before it starts to encroach. And you don't need that 3/8 everywhere at all. That's just because we're dealing with a rectangular shape here. If this was trapezoidal, if the jamb was trapezoidal, you could then bring that back, on that 3 degree bevel and be done with it. Okay, I've overstayed my welcome. Let me know how this turns out.
And everything was going well on my demonstration until they don't put any indication in the directions about how high the pivot is and what you should reduce the door slab by.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I got messed up. I did everything as per the directions, but to put it in, and I can't get it into the opening because the door is on in relation to to the rough opening. They don't say like to subtract 1 1/4 inch pivot hardware at the base in any of their installation. The thin piece of stainless. What's the purpose of that?
The thin piece of stainless?
Yeah, it's the same shape as one of the hardware parts. It's rectangular, but it's about 16 strong in thickness. And I'm trying to figure out what the purpose of that is. If you have metal on both surfaces in the door and in the jamb, what would be the purpose of that?
Where does this thin piece of stainless go? Is it the cover plate for the header?
It doesn't have any screw holes in it. It's rectangular and it's punched out. I don't have it in front of me. I'm not in my shop. I'm heading to a job. But yeah, so those were the two things. And then also I put the 3 degree bevel on the slab, and it still tends to be hitting on the pivot side. Now I radiused the interior portion. I was hoping not to radius the exterior, but I think I'm going to have to radius the exterior in order to get the pivot. I haven't I haven't reduced the slab in relation to the jam because I incurred that height elevation. I was working on it for 3/4 of the day. I got frustrated, so I walked away from it. But yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what the only place that you would use a thin piece of stainless would be to cover the preparation of the hardware in the header. That's the only place where you would use that. The template does absolutely call out what you are to do in terms of the height.
It does? Whereabouts?
Right in the center. If you want, if you want to have it in front of you and us be on the phone, or I can just describe it to you.
I'll look again. I looked through it. So it's on the second sheet of the installation instructions in the center then? Does it give a number, like reduce the slab height by an inch and a half, or?
Well, it's not that obvious. And I'm not sure. The template that I'm looking at, it's page 1 of 2. It shows the clearance of it shows the 1/16 of an inch from the underside of the header to the top of the door. And then it shows a 1/2 inch clearance from the bottom of the door to the finished floor. So that would be your finished opening height, less 9/16 is your net door height. Based on the way that they've drawn the depth at which you mortise the bottom arm. So if that 1/2 inch clearance needed to change, the variable is how deep you mortise the bottom arm. So
okay, yeah, I guess into the door, because you can't change the jam hardware. That sits on the side of the jam. You mortise that in, and that's perched on the floor material, whatever it is. But that's like an inch when you get the mechanism and the bottom of it, and then the pivot. I'm surprised they say 9/16. That seems under.
What they're saying is your net in the example. The net door height would be 9/16 less than the finished height. That's based on you mortising the door, the bottom arm, 1 1/32 of an inch deep. So that's how you get that 1/2 inch.
All right.
So if you needed 3/4 inch, let's say, clearance, then you would subtract that mortise depth by that amount.
Yeah, I'm not, the bottom of the door, I don't mind having it, whatever they have, it's not critical for that. It's just figuring out the height in relation to the slab in the jam, just setting that right on the finished floor and just mortising it in flush, not having to recess it any deeper in the bottom of the door.
Sure. Well, then your clearance is going to be really large. If you just want to surface mount that bottom arm, it's going to be the 1/2 inch plus the 1 1/32. So it's going to be you'll have a huge gap down there.
Yeah, so that's the thing. With the radiuses and the three degree bevel now and all this, it's almost like it's kind of defeating the purpose for what I was trying to do. For the aesthetics. So I don't know. I might have to go a different route. I'm gonna cut the door down, get it to work, but I don't know. It's not turning out. I'm losing a lot of heat out of the door with the radiuses, and then obviously the distance, I can reduce that in the bottom, okay. But then the 3-degree bevel on the interior, the whole thing was to make it so the planes of the wall come through evenly, essentially. I was trying to think how I could make a stop of some sort to reduce that 3-degree bevel, but it's really, you need to have the door open, so it's flush to the interior. So I don't know. What would sauce hinges cost for that door?
Just standard satin chrome, 220s. Those are, not very expensive. They're probably $50, $60, $80 each, something like that.
But they got to carry that weight, 200 pounds?
Oh, they wouldn't even break a sweat.
Yeah, because I've got some of those, the same job. I've got sauce hinges in 1 3/4 slabs with the rock York, and 2 of the doors have blown through the steel jamb. The bottom hinge on the sauce, which, typically a door sags, they've blown through the steel jamb. Granted, it's pressed steel. It's not, it's a 16th thickness, but I was just curious. Because I don't know. I might have to go that route versus this hole, because it's not really turning out what I need. That's the thing.
Yeah, no, I understand. The jamb is already in place, so you can't forego the radius of the edge of the door and create yourself a customized jamb, so you don't have to radius the door. The 3-degree bevel, that's going to be directly related to your pivot point and the thickness of the door. You can mortise into the edge an inserted pile. To help close that up. They do it in hospitals. The gap at the bottom, that can be as small as 1/2 inch.
With this hardware, you can recess that bottom piece up in there that deep, huh? All right.
Yeah. I'll send you the template so it's the top of your email inbox.
Yeah, well, that's the second page of the installation instructions, right?
It's page 1 of what I'm looking at. I don't recall. It's been so long, I don't recall what's in the box.
Page 2 is the real detailed page. It shows cut-throughs and cross-sections of the installation. Page 1's basically narrative of the installation. But getting back to the sauce, see, with the sauce, too, I have slabs on this job where they're square. You don't have a bevel. They're about a 3/16 reveal around the entire slab in relation to the jamb. That hinge you're talking about, is that like basically 7/8 or 1 inch wide, basically, by like 4 inches high?
Oh, I would probably use the sauce 220. That hinge is 5.5 tall, and its depth is about 2 inches deep. But if you've got pressed steel frames, Well,
no, this is a wood jamb, but
for this door, of course. Yeah, you'd go with the sauce 220. They make a heavier hinge as well.
And then you offset that. You put the top 2 offset from the center. You bring them more towards the top of the door, or can you go to the center?
No, suck them towards the top.
And then the bottom one's like 10 to 12 inches up from the bottom.
Yeah, they've got a guideline by which to do that.
And then
depending on the height.
Can you get away with not that 3-degree bevel too, just a square edge?
I don't see how you would, no matter what you would use to hang the door, I don't see how you'd be able to get away from easing that edge.
Yeah.
Other than having a really wide gap there to begin with.
Oh, yeah. Huh. You have those in stock? You got to order them.
No, I stocked the 220s, sure.
But just in chrome, huh? Not stainless. Yeah.
It's a different part number in solid stainless. I may have those. What I'll do is I'll research that and I'll send you a second email.
Uh-huh. And those have to be rabbited roughly, 1/2 inch, 5/8 or 3/4. I'm just thinking, what's behind that jamb? It's all, it's compounded in on one side and then it's cedar on the other side. I don't know if I put it tight to the stud. It's been a while. That's what I'm trying to think. What you need at least 1/2 inch to rabbit those in, right? Or just to...
you would have to have a lot of solid material back there. You're going to mortise for the hinge itself a 1/2 inch deep.
Right, and then the hinge goes in about, 2.5 or?
Total depth is about 2 inch.
2 inch. Yeah. See, this is the thing. I don't know if I've got fasteners. Shit, I didn't plan it for those. That's the problem. Damn. Tough scenario. I don't know.
Well, if you can do the radius, or the bull nose on the door, you can, on the pivot style, you can always add a stop, I would think. Put the heavier bevel on that, whatever is needed, and then have a stop project out, and you can even on the face of that apply, self-adhesive gasketing or something to give you some seal.
Yeah. Initially, when we talked, it's been a while. I had this thing kicking around, and I haven't had a chance to get back to it. My thought process. Were we trying to just radius one side, or we had the radius both? I know in the installation instructions they say radius both, but initially we talked about just radiusing one side, I thought.
Yeah, if your door I believe is single acting, so you don't radius the entire door. You only bull nose the pull side.
Okay, the pull side in relation to the jamb then that it comes out against. Excuse me.
When the door is closed, the only side of the elevation of the door that you would have to put a bull nose on would be the side that you pull the door open from.
Yeah. Yeah. See, that's the other thing. I've got it on the interior, which is hitting on the exterior, so I'm going to have to change that. I'm going to have to do another whole mock-up then. That's the problem with starting something and stopping. Yeah. Well, I'll work my way through it. Oh, and then in the installation packets there, screws. What do they send this for? Sheet metal screws? Do they have some short number 8s, like half-inch flatheads in there, besides the wood screws?
Those, I don't know anything that would be quite half-inch, but, your top pivot's going to take some shorter screws generally than your bottom arm.
But these weren't even wood. These were just flat machine screws, half-inch by like number 8s.
Oh, okay. That's right. So that's going to hold that thin stainless plate onto the top header hardware. Those are just the machine screws to hold that decorative plate on.
Oh, I'm going to have to look at that closer then, too, because I've got that Morris in the top header. I'll have to look at that. All right. Huh. All right. All right, well, I'll try cutting down the door and see how that works, and then probably put a radius on the exterior again. Well, I have the radius on the interior, but that's probably wrong, so I'll put it on the exterior and see how everything looks, if I can get it swinging.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then have to make a decision if I'm going to go this way. I mean, because sauce is basically the only other way to approach this, right? I mean, that's what you said initially, I probably should have, but I had the jam in, so I thought this would be a safer method.
Sauce, because it's single acting, sauce is an option. Yeah, it just is, and it does decomplicate everything in my opinion. It just does make it easier. You must install those sauce hinges exactly where the template says to, but if you do that, it's going to work. You're still going to have to put a heavy bevel on that opposite pivot style. That will always be required, but not much on the soft hinge style. I mean, I wouldn't keep it square edge just to give it some relief, but yeah. Now in stainless steel, it's a much more expensive hinge, which we do stock, and I've emailed you a link to it so you can look at it.
Okay.
Because it's non-ferrous. The regular sauce is primarily made of zinc. It's got steel in it, but if you need something that's truly stainless steel, then that would be a different part number. But like I said, you can review that.
Yeah. All right. All right. Thanks a lot.
All right, sir. I'll be here all day. Thank you.
Yeah, bye.
So just to address some of the things that the client was making statements about. So in the template, it's absolutely called out. His question was, I don't know what to undersize the door based on the finished opening. Well, it is clear here, just for the record. And he may not be looking at this paperwork, but
you need a 1/2 inch underneath the door, is what they're saying. Looking at the template a little bit closer, though, they're showing the 1/2 inch is the height of the bottom arm that sits on the floor. So this 1/2 inch here is going to have to be greater. It's going to have to be closer to 5/8 of an inch. It'll have to be more than a 1/2 of an inch. But what's fixed is the finished height is fixed. They're calling out a 1/16 of an inch clearance between the underside of the header and the top of the door. I would make that an 1/8 of an inch. This it's 1 in 11/32. I had said it's 1 in 1/32. I was looking at the template like this, and I couldn't see it as well. So the finished opening height is fixed. The gap between the top of the door and the underside of the header is fixed. This 1/2 inch is fixed. You know that you've got a mortise at 1 in 11/16. Using those numbers, you can turn those into variables so that you can determine your overall height. If this 1/2 inch is going to become 5/8, you reduce this by 1/8. If this is going to become 1/8 of an inch, you're going to have to increase this. In order for that to fit. So it's not straightforward. That is quite true, but it's also, when you study the template, it can be derived. I think the customer, moving on to the second point of confusion for the client, he wasn't sure of what part 2 was, this thin piece of metal. It's the decorative plate that goes underneath the top pivot. Those machine screws that he references later in the conversation are here. It sounds like so he's got a single acting door. It sounds like he has radiused or bullnosed the wrong side of the door. The bullnose has to always go on the pull side of the door. So if he's going to bullnose here, that door's got to swing out in this direction. Because of the door thickness, he's always going to have a very heavy bevel on the door. 3 degree is not going to work. You're going to have a much heavier bevel on that door edge. His concern is that he's going to be leaking. I don't recall if this is a sauna. It might be a sauna, is what it is, and I get it. So what I would suggest is, I had mentioned material that's mortised to the edge of the door. So the Dorbin 97 AS, you would mortise into the door. They're calling it to be 1/2 inch, and it's about 1/2 inch wide as well. I'd have to put a caliper on that. The hardware itself is just this aluminum extrusion here that you then slide the pile into. Below there is a spring and then that screw so that you can adjust the projection of this over time. So I would suggest the client literally mortise for this type of hardware in the pivot style of the door, put it right over here, and he'll have a seal here. That's how they do it in hospital bathrooms that are in patient rooms, because those are generally rescue doors that are on pivots, and there can be a gap here that they want to close off the line of sight. Not so much here, but over on the lock style, because let's take a closer look at what I'm talking about. So in this hospital scenario, you will have a radius door edge. It will be beveled. It is center hung. That vertical axis of pivoting is down in here, because they'll have rescue hardware on this, a rescue pivot. The concept is, however, the same. The issue being is actually, let's go back. I think what it'll be is a radius door edge with a square edge over here, which is actually more appropriate for what I want to describe, having a square edge. The point is with this rescue hardware, that door will generally swing into the bathroom. So they've got a pivot. The vertical axis of pivoting is somewhere down over here. The door swings in. The reason they put a square edge on this, which then requires them to have a heavier than average gap here, is because with rescue hardware, if you needed to, you could swing that door out by flipping over a toggle basically in the jamb. That's just the way the rescue hardware works. In order to close off this unusually wide gap, they'll add pile in here. So the client could easily mortise pile into the pivot edge to close some of that off. Now, regarding the door thickness and his concern over the bevel that's required
for this obscenely thick door, which is 5 1/8 inch. Because it's so thick, he's got to put a really heavy bevel on it. Okay. Vertical axis of pivoting is somewhere over here. The door swings in this direction. My argument is, well, yeah, you might have to add a stop here. That's all there is to it. You might have to incorporate into your design an additional piece of wood that you can then mortise that pile into. You can add self-adhesive teardrop gasketing here that the door can make contact with. Seal it here. Seal it here. Okay? If you want, seal it out here with that same pile. Seal it at the header. Put an automatic door bottom in at the bottom, which you can do. And now you've got a good seal everywhere. And he does, I wouldn't use the term begrudgingly, but he does, in a certain sense, resist revisiting the original conversation we had where I said, why do you want that pivot? Just use sauce hinges. Because it makes a lot of these problems less work. But it's not time to abandon the pivot, because you can still account for it. You can still make all this work. I think that's everything the client mentioned, and we will continue this as this progresses. Right now it's March of 2023, and my earliest file on this job goes back to about Thanksgiving of 2022. So it's been a project. Thank you. I also wanted to mention the sauce hinges. I had first mentioned the sauce 220. I don't think there'd be any problem with a sauce 220 for what he wants to do. Based on his weight, I'd probably put a minimum of 4. I'd probably put 5. The template for that sauce 220 is here. This is where I'm coming up with the 5 1/2 inch height, the 2 inch overall thickness, the 1/2 inch thickness basically for what he would have to mortise. He then said stainless. That's a different hinge altogether. That would be the 420 SS by Sauce, which we do have a small quantity in stock. A much more expensive hinge because of what it's made of, and its template is going to look like this. 4 1/2 tall, 1 3/8 wide. You've got your depth, about same depth, about 2 inch, just short of 2 inch. And if you want true non-ferrous, this would be the hinge to go. Why would you want a true non-ferrous sauce hinge? Well, we've done projects like transit systems for city government. You know, they're adding their light rail everywhere, and all that material is exposed to the exterior, to the elements, and they want concealed hardware, and this type of hinge could very likely work very well in that application. So that was the sauce material that we had discussed.
I built a 2x6 jamb, the same depth as the jamb where the door is going in. I built a dummy door, the same depth. Put everything in as per the installation instructions. Radius the front edge of the pivot, and radius the back of it for the hell of it. Put the 3-degree bevel on the strike side, and I can't get the door to swing. It's bound on the pivot side. And I was curious how much. I went by their installation instructions on the 8.5 by 11 sheet they sent with the hardware, but it doesn't work.
So you did all, you mortised it. You radiused it or bullnosed it according to their template.
I bullnosed, I forget exactly. It's a big bullnose. I don't know if it's 3/4 or 7/8. I ordered a special router bit, and I radiused it, the door slab that I made. But I can't get it to swing. So obviously then the door has to be decreased. The question now becomes by how much in order to get it to swing. Because it won't swing. It's bound onto the jamb when you try to open it. You get about 1.5 inches, if that, and it's bound on the jamb. The jamb is held. It's a 2x6 jamb I made, and I put plywood on the back side of it. I ripped the plywood parallel so there's no bow in the 2x6s, and I screwed that to the back so that it's straight.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there's those AutoCAD videos that I made you were the ways to go about doing that. And if you followed their instructions, it sounds like you didn't, because you didn't create a 2 5/8 radius. You used a much smaller radius. So that would be why it's binding, because the radius is too small. It's not curved enough.
Okay.
What I would suggest is obviously go back to the last couple of videos I sent, because that's where I'm going through. This is what you need to do. This is where you put it. This is where you place it. This is how it'll work. Or send me a sketch of your jamb and your door with dimensions of where everything is.
Well, I've got pictures. I took pictures of the mock-up I did, the width of the jamb, the width of the door with a tape measure on it, and I can't spin it because it won't open. I've got to release the whole thing to pull the door out, because I just can't get it to rotate.
Yeah, because the bull nose is the radius of the bull nose sounds like it's insufficient. It's not large enough. It's too tight of a radius. Is why that would be.
Mm-hmm.
So
I thought way back. I mean, this is the problem. I should have stuck with it. I lose my thought process. But I thought we decided that we could go with a smaller radius, and I ordered a special bit based on that. And I don't know if it's an inch or I've got the bit. I don't know exactly what it is, but I ordered a special bit based on that conversation. But
well, based on that conversation, I made proof of concept videos and sent those to you. And what I would suggest is, and the proof of concept videos are not, we can't follow the manufacturer's template. And the reason we can't is because you can't get your hands on a bit that's 5 1/4 diameter. It's mad. You
right.
Remember trying to find one, and you bumped into a 1 5/8 or whatever the greatest radius, and it was $1 million at that point. So you did buy something, and the smaller radius is going to force you to offset the vertical axis of pivoting. It can't be in the center of the thickness of the door anymore because your radius isn't tight enough. You got to suck that towards the pull side. The bottom arm is not going to be centered in the door anymore, and it would just the way to do this is to go back to your emails to see where I've got a video link or attached, whatever it is, probably a link, and just run that, and you'll see exactly where everything has to be.
All right, so you sent me that video then. Okay. All right,
I sent at least 2. I know that there was, and then the idea developed after that. Something developed, and I made another one saying this is where you have to put the axis of pivoting, and this is where your radius has to be. It's basically shifting it so that we're compensating for the extreme door thickness. Oh, no. We're shifting it to compensate for the limitation of the radius of the roundover bit. That's what it is. I mean, if you had a $5,000 shaper and an unlimited budget, you could have the tooling made. Yeah.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, I guess I'll review that then and see if I can get that to work as per your video then. All right.
I'm good. So I'm in your profile. I'm going to send you the most current one, which was from just a couple of days before Christmas. Which, yeah. So I'm gonna send that to you right now. So it's the top of your email, and I am happy to whip up AutoCAD again. I just need input parameters. What's the radius? What's the vertical axis of pivoting? I know the thickness. and then, and then I'll be able to do that again for you. Happy to.
All right. Well, let me take a look at that then, and see. I'll reconstruct everything and see how that works out then.
Yeah, and call me if you're doing it during typical business hours. You'll get me on the phone. I generally work between 6 and 7 Eastern time because I'm just, I'm done with this and I'm waiting for that. So I've got an hour to work at home at night. So you can call me then. Or I can be available on Saturday, that kind of stuff. This is going to work perfectly. Yeah. We just got to get, where you're going to radius at figured out, where you're going to mortise it.
In the video, it states that then, huh? Okay.
It tells you where your vertical axis of pivoting is, and it tells you, based on the radius that we're working on, whatever that was of the bit, and it also was saying, well, here's the gap, the margin between the jamb and the edge of the door. Because those are the 3 things, that are important to know.
Right.
In your mind's eye, just imagine you had a much bigger radius, and then you can say to yourself, yeah, if you took a belt sander and you belt sanded the daylights off of that, you could see, yeah, I could get it open further if I removed all that wood. But we're approaching it differently, where we're shifting where you're going to mortise the bottom arm off of center line to account for that smaller radius. If you had like a 2-inch thick door, you'd be okay.
Right. Yeah, I'll look. I mean, obviously I'll do it, but I'm almost leaning towards getting the sauce. I mean, I don't know. I'll see how it all works out. But and then the other thing is too, the bottom you end up with like 1 inch off of the floor, which is, I mean, in this case it'll give draft for the sauna, but I didn't find that. You said in the middle of the page. I was looking for that. You said in the middle of the page of their installation instructions. I can't find it, but I mean, it is what it is. I can't sink the bottom arm into the concrete. It's got radiant heating in there, so it's going to sit on top, which is fine. And you actually should have a little airflow underneath for the sauna. Actually, what's that?
But if you have that data in front of you, if you have the template, you can get it down to basically 9/16. You can get it down further than that if you want to modify your door.
So you're going to that into the bottom of the door deeper then. Okay.
That's the whole relationship. Your clearance, dimension from the bottom of the door to the top of the floor, and your mortise depth of the bottom arm, those are related. The shallower you go with the depth of the mortise, the greater the clearance you'll have, and vice versa. You can mount that arm flush on the bottom of the door. You'll have a huge gap, or you can sink it as deep as possible, and you'll have the smallest gap permissible. And the smallest gap permissible is the thickness of the L bracket that's going to sit on top of the floor, since we're not piercing into it. Yeah.
I just think when you start doing stuff like that, your tendency to shear the slab happens, so that's why I was basically sinking it to the depth of the material, the stainless, essentially.
Oh, no, you'll have to go much more than that. You'll have to double the depth. Your gap is going to be huge at that point.
Yeah. All right. I'll get back to work.
Hang in there, Tom. Call me. Yeah. Get it all in front of you and call me back.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. Bye.
Yes, sir. Anytime. Thank you.
Architectural Builders Supply hopes you have enjoyed this program. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.